You know how there are certain crimes that just make you mad even if it didn't happen to you, but if it did happen to you, then it makes you even madder because there's nothing you can do about it. It is such a pain. It's so obnoxious. It's such a violation. I had this happen the other day. I had my truck stolen out of the driveway of my house, and I went to bed at night, and the truck was there. We had been outside at like maybe 9:30 or 10 working on some things, and my daughter was saying, "Oh, let me get that out of the truck." I'm like, "You can't because it's locked." And she tried it. She was like, "Oh, yeah, it's locked." "Oh, well, I'll get it tomorrow," because I didn't have the key with me. So we wake up in the morning, and I go to run an errand, and the truck just isn't there anymore. I came back inside. I'm like, "Hey, I don't want anybody to panic or anything, but did anybody move my truck?" My kids aren't old enough to drive. They don't know how to drive. So I know the answer is going to be no. I know the answer is no. The truck got stolen. And, Camilla does the, "What?" "Yeah, it's not out there at all. It was last night, but it's not out there at all." Well, I did a whole bunch of detective work and everything. I went around to all kinds of neighbors and tracked which direction the vehicle went using their Ring doorbells. And I got video of the thieves, and I got video of them stealing my truck, like down to the exact minute. And I talked to the detectives, and I did all this work. And the detective at one point was like, "How are you getting all of this video footage of this thing from all of these different businesses and individuals?" He's like, that can take warrants and subpoenas and all this work. And I was like, I just went up and asked, and I told them somebody stole my truck. And they're like, "Oh, one time somebody broke into my house and they took my thing," and everybody had a story. And so everybody felt vicarious, passionate anger about the time that they got wronged. And so they were all willing to help. And the detective was like, "Oh, that's really, really cool. Well, thanks for doing all of the legwork on this." And then a week later, I got a call and they said, "Yeah, we found it out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of some field." And I was like, "Well, what does it look like? Is it in okay shape?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't know if you're going to want it back." So I got it back. And the whole thing was spray painted black, like rattle can spray paint, and all of the badging of the truck was stripped off. And then they used what looked like a soldering iron to try to burn out the word on the tailgate that described the make and model of the truck, except they burned it in the exact shape of the letters that they were trying to burn off. And in the end, the thing got totaled out. It smelled a whole lot like meth and weed after that, and I didn't want it anymore. And so, goodbye, truck. It was fun while it lasted. But in addition to a couple days worth of frustration and things being a gigantic pain in the butt, one of the things that I think will really stick with me from this was, again, that sense of violation that people felt vicariously through my experience. People know what it's like to be taken advantage of. And, nowadays, it's not just stuff that gets stolen, but identities get stolen, credit cards, online credentials, things like that. And man, you just feel so helpless to do anything about it. And in addition to badly wanting justice for whoever wronged you in that way, you also want to face. I just want to see the person who did this. I want to know who thought about this and decided this would be a good idea. Is it somebody I know? Is it somebody I offended? Is it somebody who misunderstood what I meant and I wasn't trying to offend anybody? Or is it somebody that, maybe they have a legitimate reason to be mad at me and I need to change how I live or what I'm doing? Well, I don't get to know that because somebody did this far, far away and I don't get to face them because they're not getting caught. That set of conflicting emotions of victimhood and anger and desire for justice creates this collegiality, this sisterhood and brotherhood of anger and resentment toward that destructive thief that just takes something that is perfectly fine and in good shape and has value and makes the world better and wrecks it recklessly and stupidly with no gain or no value and no sense to it. And I think that sense of abiding anger that I got from all those people I interacted with in the story I just told you that was way too long is the same thing that would have been conjured in the hearts of the people who are hearing the parable in Matthew 13 about the wheat and the weeds. For those of us who don't do agricultural things, it might not sound like that big of an offense, but to people who lived in that world, they all would have understood what a tremendous, senseless offense, what a waste, what a violation this thing would be. Like if somebody came and wrecked your crop by sowing bad seed in the middle of your good seed, you go out there and you look at the field and you'd be like, that happened right here, like right where I work, right where I live. That is such a violation. So that part is predictable, but all of these parables have a twist. I'm going to read it to you again because the twist is at the end. Jesus told him another parable, Matthew 13:24. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. So he doesn't even figure out that this violation occurred until much later. It's not like the truck where I knew the next morning. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. So the servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you're pulling up the weeds, you might also root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I'll tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, and then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." The twist is how not reactionary the master is. Everybody else wants to act now. There's been an injustice. There's been a violation. I think the original audience would have been like, "Oh, somebody needs to do something. Yeah, that happened to this guy that I know. That happened to my mom. That happened to me. I want justice right now. Who were these jerks? Where's this story going?" But the story doesn't give us any justice. We don't get the part that's cathartic where the jerk who did it gets caught and brought in and has to answer for it. Nope. He just gets away with it, at least for the time being. Does a bunch of damage. But the master is not flustered. He doesn't change his take on things. The master, instead of saying, "This thing is ruined and broken, just forget it. Plow the whole dang thing up, rip everything up. I don't care what kind of damage it does. It's never going to be perfect again anyway. Why does this always happen to me?" No, the master still sees value in this compromised field. He sees something redeemable. He sees that there's still a harvest to be brought in here. And it's going to require adding another step, and it's going to be difficult. But the master is the only one in the story, including the audience, who doesn't want to go and make more of a mess in response to the mess. Now, the weeds or the tares that we're talking about here are probably the darnel plant or some type of plant from that general family. And look, all of this stuff is Googling and reading from books. I don't understand enough about this world to know for sure, but here's what I'm being told. It genuinely looks like wheat from an early age until almost maturity. But then when the wheat matures and starts to turn golden, the tares will mature and start to take on a little bit of a purple hue. But the tare doesn't even have to make it all the way to maturity. If it's mingled with a field and cattle get in there, and this isn't just from the ancient world, this is still the same deal with this plant today, and the cattle eat a decent amount of it, they act goofy, they get dull in the head. It has this weird sedative, confusing effect, and if they eat a ton of these things or darnel that are more mature, apparently that is out and out toxic. And so if you mix that in with your wheat, if somebody looked at a scenario like this and they were like, "Well, not really my problem. I sell all this grain anyway. Let's just harvest it all and send it out there." People were going to find out really quickly that was bad wheat when they ingest it in a light dose, and it has that same goofifying mild high effect on a person, or if they ingest a whole bunch, they could just out and out die from the thing. And then, of course, the person who sold that wheat is going to end up being liable for that. So this plant, the generic term for the class of which is tares, is something that was well known as a twin to wheat and legitimately dangerous, not just a hassle, but an actual risk and threat to people and livestock as well. The point is, it is a real problem. So while we still haven't got to Jesus' interpretation of his own parable, just the raw read that we've looked at gives us the following components of the anatomy of this parable. One, there definitely was an ancient practice by which one grouchy party would try to ruin another party by tearing their fields. This wasn't just something that kings did to their defeated enemies. It was something that rivals might do to each other, and we see that Roman law accommodates for that. Two, these tears were an actual problem. It wasn't just cute, like, "Oh, no, now my wheat's not going to taste as good." It had an intoxicating effect in light doses, a toxic effect in heavy doses. That had consequences. And the twist in the parable is that all of the servants are as angry as you and I are when we hear a story of an injustice or a violation or a theft or just a senseless destruction or vandalism of a thing. But the master is chill. He knows an enemy did this. He understands what's going on, but he views the field as being redeemable. The harvest is still there. It's going to take some work. It's going to take my masterly attention to get it right. But we're not going to go rip everything up right now. That would be chasing a problem with an even more destructive problem. And we'll see how Jesus explains how all this fits together and what it means about the kingdom here in a couple more conversations. Thanks again to all of you who support the program at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. I'm grateful, my family's grateful, and I really love doing this, and I get to because you do that. So thank you a ton. I would also like to let you know that I am working on a cool little thing that I'm going to be sending all the patrons at any level, and I think I will have that ready enough to announce what it is tomorrow. Still cracking on that one, but it's really cool and it's going to be very fun. All right, we're going to leave it there. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.